about to follow men, women, and things that live on the fringes of society, who aren't beholden to no man, no law, and who always have one eye on the horizon. So grab your map and set your headings. There are adventures to be had, mateys, and treasures to be found. X Marks the Spot is an anthology of pirate and pirate-related fiction. It is put out by the students of the Superstars Writing Seminar, and it is edited by Lisa Mangum, who is part of that seminar, and it's just a really, really fun ride. Now, just so you're aware, I was gifted this book by one of my friends who is in the Superstars Writing Seminar in exchange for an honest review of the book. So I did not pay for the book. I am not being paid to give this review, but I was given the book. And I do highly recommend that you check this book out. If you're a fan of pirates, and if you're a lover of short fiction, something for a quick escape to satisfy your day, then this is a really good book to start you out with. So make sure that you check it out. If you're not too familiar with the Superstars Writing Seminar, you may be familiar with one of its more preeminent staff members, and that is Kevin J. Anderson. You may know Kevin from the Star Wars Expanded Universe. You may also know him from the Dune Expanded Universe. He writes in collaboration with Brian Herbert, Frank Herbert's son, for many of the newer Dune books that have come out in recent years. So Kevin's very well known, and this book is published by Wordfire Press, which is his publishing house. So keep that in mind. This is no small fry when it comes to small fiction. This has big names attached to it, and it's well worth your time to read it. So now I want to get into a little bit more detail about my review and what you can expect from this book. As with any book of short fiction, you have your really, really standout stories. You have stories that are really fun, but maybe not that spectacular. And you have other stories that may or may not really be your cup of tea. It all depends on the reader, right? And this book was very much that way for me. I would say that 90% of the material in this book I absolutely loved. And whether they were favorites or whether they were just stories I had a lot of fun with, I just really enjoyed myself. So I'm going to talk about the ones that really stood out to me, and I'll talk about a few others that you can have fun with, and then I'll briefly touch on some of the stories that weren't really my cup of tea, but maybe the cup of tea for certain readers. So with that said, let's get right to it. My friend Tracy is one of the authors in this book, and she wrote a story called The Pirate's Cat, and this story was just really a lot of fun. It's about a captain who plays a game with a witch in exchange for his life force, and he ends up losing. He tries to go and get it back from her, but it's clear that he's outmatched and outwitted in terms of the witch, and it's told from the perspective of his cat, and the cat does everything it can to protect its master, to rescue its master if it can, and it's just a great ball of fun, furball of fun to be had. So I really enjoyed that story, and I think many of you will too. There is another story that really stood out to me about a a girl who is kidnapped by a band of pirates because she is part of a group of people that are known or rumored to be able to call upon the wind or wish the wind into existence, and they need wind for their sails. So that is another one. It's really unique. The magic is very subtle in the story, but it's a pretty cool magic if you ask me. So I highly recommend that one to you as well. That's actually the first story in this book, so have a lot of fun with it. It's very unique and very different, and there are things that you hope would happen and characters that you hope would get out of the story alive, and you end up being kind of shocked that they don't. And so this isn't all positive and light and happy endings necessarily. So keep that in mind. It's very true to life, and it's raw, and it's real, and it's thought-provoking. So very, very fun story, and I think you will greatly enjoy it. It's called The Wish Shore. So make that one of your first stories that you read. It is the first story in the book, so why not, right? There's another one called Porch Pirates, and it's set in modern day. It's about a group of people that steal packages from people that they get delivered, whether it's by FedEx or UPS or the Postal Service, and they're part of a thieving guild, and they steal these packages, and one of the characters just happens to steal a package that's very valuable to a person who builds model ships inside bottles, and it's a really cool story. I'm not always a huge fan of urban fantasy, modern day fantasy, but this was a fun romp. I really enjoyed myself. There's another story in the book called Where We Will All Go, and it's about a girl whose mother, it turns out, is a very important figure in helping people transition from life to the afterlife, and she is on the path to take over the reins from her mother, but she doesn't know it. So it's kind of an interesting little story. It's a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun reading it, and it was very different, and I think many who read it will enjoy it as much as I did. One of the last stories in the book is called Sea Wolves. Now, you often hear pirates referred to as the wolves of the sea sometimes, right? But this is a little more literal. This story incorporates pirates that are actually werewolves. And I won't really go into much detail other than that. You just have to read it. It is a really, really fun story. I had a blast reading it. So make sure that you check that out when you get this book. And one of the things I liked about it is that it did a very good job of making a concise story and fitting all the elements into the story that you needed to have a satisfactory ending. It didn't really leave on a cliffhanger, which that's hard to do with short stories. It's hard to craft a short story that encapsulates everything that you want it to. And this story really does a good job of that, I think. So Sea Wolves is another one that you need to check out in this book. The Good Pirate's Final Storm. This story was really endearing for me. It follows an old man named Good John. He's in a nursing home, and he has it in his heart and mind to set out on one final adventure. And he hears about this rare breed of parrot that has been discovered. And he goes and he finds this parrot, and it turns out they know each other. And you just get to hear this really, really unique tale of a pirate who had found the Fountain of Youth, and he got to it before Ponce de Leon did, and now he's in the modern day. The water of life is draining from his body. He's getting older, and he wants to set out on one final adventure. It was really a lot of fun, and if I had to pick more than one favorite out of the book, this would definitely be on my list of favorites, because there's just something about, I get really endeared by older people. They're so sweet, and they have so many fun stories. And this is just the kind of story that really makes you feel like you're there and in the moment. You feel like you're in the crowd hearing this story from Good John. And so I definitely recommend that be one of the many stories that you check out when you read this book. There's another story called Princess Yum Yum's Challenge, and it follows a female pirate named Molly, who is out to best some of the other pirates on the sea. And she knows one pirate in particular that's got a little bit bigger ship than she does, but she's determined to best him and outsmart him. And it's kind of a fun little tale. There's some good romance in the story, and I definitely think this would be one that you would check out. This is the story, I believe anyway, that is the inspiration for the cover art on this book. I think Molly is the pirate that is depicted on the cover. So it's a really fun story. I highly recommend it. Now let's talk about some other stories that you might find in this book that weren't necessarily my cup of tea, or maybe I just didn't really enjoy them that much, but that doesn't mean that other readers won't. As I said before, it's very, very personal. Everybody's unique and different in what they like in stories. There is one story in particular that follows the lit RPG model. And if you don't know what lit RPG is, it's basically a story that bears a very, very strong resemblance to a role-playing game, whether it be a video game or a tabletop game or Dungeons and Dragons. And you've got people leveling up, and they have to do certain tasks and talk to certain people in order to beat the game. So Lit RPG is very much designed around that particular format. And there's one story in this book that follows that. And it was interesting, it was entertaining, but Lit RPG is not really my thing. And I don't know why. I do enjoy role-playing games and video games, but maybe I just don't like to read about them. I don't know. But Lit RPG is actually becoming a very popular subgenre. So don't discount it just because I didn't necessarily care for it. I think there's a good amount of people out there that will really enjoy this little story. So make sure that, that if that's something that you enjoy, make sure you check that out. There's other stories in the book, one in particular that was clearly meant for kids. And I don't normally skip stories or skip ahead or things like that in a book, but this one I did. It was clearly written for kids, which is fine. Kids need good stories too. But I skipped that one because it was just, too simple for my tastes. And if there's one criticism I have about this book, it's that some of the stories are not written for a clear audience. The book as a whole is written for people who like pirate stories. And that's very clear, and that audience is played to very well. But there are some stories in the book, while they follow that pirate theme, it's not really flowing with one consistent audience in terms of age or in terms of background and speaking to the knowledge of the reader. Most of the stories are really fine line, more on the border of young adult and adult. They speak to a specific audience. It's clear, it's easy to read, easy to understand. But then there are other stories that didn't really fit into the same audience as the book as a whole did. And that's where I would place this story that was written more for kids. You know, it's a great story for your little ones, but you wouldn't really necessarily want your little ones reading other stories in the book until they're a little bit older. So there was kind of a divergence with some of the stories as to what audience they were speaking to. There's another story in the book that was clearly written for people who are familiar with coding. And I mean computer programming and coding as a computer language. There is one story in particular that was clearly written for people who understand code and computer lingo, and I mean very technical computer lingo. So I kind of muscled through that. It ended up being a pretty entertaining little story, but it wasn't really written with a broader audience in mind. And I'll leave it at that. So those are some of my small criticisms. Overall, this book was really fun, really engaging. It was a quick read. I read it in the matter of 2 or 3 days. And it only took me that long because I had other stuff that was going on, and I am reading other books. So I kind of was juggling a lot of things. But in general, it's a very, very quick read. I highly, highly recommend this to anyone. And yeah, I had my criticisms, but I don't think that should deter anyone from picking up this book. I give this book a solid 4.5 stars. Goodreads doesn't do half stars, so I dropped it down to a 4-star, just because I don't think it's a solid 5-star read, but it is a very solid 4.5 stars. So you heard it here. Yes, I gave it 4.5 stars, and I really think Goodreads needs to get with the program and add half stars so that we can be a little bit more detailed in our reviews. So keep that in mind. What are your thoughts? Does this sound like a book that you would really get into? And do you like pirates? If you do, I think you'll love this book. It's a new release. It came out in April, so it's very hot on the presses. And there are some really, really great authors that are showcased in this book. I am anxiously waiting to see what happens with some of their careers. A few in particular that really stood out to me. And I love reading new authors and supporting new authors. So this gave me that chance. And I hope you do too. I hope you enjoy supporting new authors, and I hope you will give this book a shot. Make sure that you read the description below, because I will leave a link to the book where you can purchase it in the description below. Make sure you're always looking at that description. You can find out more details about, where to find me online and where to support me, and more details and where to purchase things I talk about in the videos. So I will leave that link in the description below so that you can immediately purchase it on Amazon. And please make sure you do. Again, let me know your thoughts about this book. If you have more questions, that will help you get a more detailed idea of whether or not you want to purchase the book, feel free to ask me those in the comments below. And as always, folks, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. Make sure you share this video with your friends so that they can see my content too. And if you want to support me on Patreon, you can find my link in the description below for my Patreon. And as always, folks, please make sure that you are reading more books. I will talk to you in the next video. Bye.